This is Real Talk Radio. This is Real Talk. High Praise Ministries presents Real Talk. This is Real Talk Radio. This is Real Talk. High Praise Ministries presents Real Talk.
But this is what I would challenge you around, right? Like, take your podcast because you listen to them, right? Like, take your podcast or take this interview, for example, or any other of your interviews. And I want you to measure the amount of time that you spend talking versus your guest spends talking. And then I also want you to measure how many times your guest says something or that the initial response that you have, right? Like is, oh no, that's not right? Like, or here's the explanation for why that is X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. I just want you to just measure that, right? Like, just
I've done that.
Okay.
I've already done that equation.
You've done that for this one?
This podcast, no, because it's still going on.
Because you just did it again.
This interview is still going. I didn't say I didn't combat it. I said that what you had suggested has already been something done, minus this particular episode because we're still in the midst of it. The ratio of talk to non is 3-1. Starting when I am with what I call the pastor's crew, which I don't even know if we're still going to be doing the podcast together anymore. I got to talk with them this whole thing. So it's 3-1 with them. When I am with my wife, depending on the topic, it is 2-1.
You better let her talk. She can say whatever she wants.
It's not even letting her talk. Like, she has such a wonderful wealth of perspective that is always fascinating to me. And in everyday normal outside the podcast conversation, it's not as easy to pull from her. Mm-hmm. In the podcast, it's easy because this is the topic we're going to talk about, and it takes her a minute, but once she revs, she got it and she's in on it, and I love it. I love hearing her talk. I love her perspectives, how she looks at things, how she thinks about things, her mind, how life has shaped her. Love it. Absolutely love it. I would have rather her be able to do this interview with you than me, and me just be like a producer in the background, just kind of working, doing the puppet strings and working thing. Because she is, you'll understand, this woman is special on it. She don't think she is, and if she hears this podcast, this episode, she gonna be really mad at me for saying some things that I'm saying, but it's the truth. She is freaking outstanding. The chick is way more anointed than I am. She's way more articulate when she wants to be.
You know that.
Oh, I've been saying this about her for years. She is way more special than I am. She is it. Like, her ability to do and whatever is a mastery. And when she gets real loose and just lets go, oh my God, I love it. So it, depending on the topic and how I can kind of pull her, it's 2-1 her to me. When we have a guest, when her and I have a guest, depending on the guest, because we got 2 sets of guests that we've had on a few times. We will say one thing and we will just sit back for a half an hour and they go. But other than that, it's usually very equal. You mentioned how many times I say no, that's not accurate. It's usually not a no, that's not accurate. It is a lot of times a no, I disagree. But the podcast is supposed to be that. It's not a debate show per se, but it is a generated around perspective, which is why it's the Real Talk podcast. We're all letting off things that we either think or feel or have seen or experienced. And my experience is different than other people's experience. So it's always, I disagree because this is what I have dealt with. And we always wind up coming to some kind of resolution unless it is the pastor's crew. Pastor's crew, it's not about resolution. It winds up turning into, we're all going to preach a message out of nowhere. It's like, there's going to be a message preached. And it's not in a we're trying to compete with each other kind of a thing. It is almost like that tag team kind of a thing. So something will be said, and then JC will go off, and he'll say, "You know what? Where's that at? Look, get your Bible real quick." And he'll find the scripture, and he'll say something, and then I'll jump in like, wait, here, and then here we go, and he'll come back, and it's a whole thing. Like, so when the three of us get together, it's kind of that, but it is almost never more me than, I'd say never, almost never more me than the person that I am that is on the show. This podcast will absolutely be more me than it's on the show, but you're also very short with your answers from the start. But that has been anytime I've ever heard you talk. Aside from,
you know what, I'm gonna go practice.
And I'm not saying that that's a slight.
I am an active member of the Say Less Ministry. You know what? And I'm going to literally practice what I have learned, because I have been endowed by the Holy Spirit.
I'm not saying that as a dig.
And yes,
I promise you, I'm not saying that as a dig. No, I really am not. I'm not saying that as a dig. You have always,
whatever.
The entirety of the time I've ever known you, the entirety of the time I've ever known you, you've always had a way of being, I'll call it, very strategic with your words. So you have an ability, and I actually talked about this in one of my this past week or the week before, how we have a tendency to think that people who don't say a whole lot are the ones that are saying the most when they speak, which is not always the case. But you are that person who falls into that category. Like, I've always known you to be, when anyone has a conversation with you that I've been around. Can't speak for when I ain't been around, but when I've been around, it has been here is my answer, and you may get my answer in about 20 seconds or less. But the gravity of what you always say usually is heavier than anything else in the conversation that's ever said. So even in the conversation we have had, the questions that I've asked and some of the statements you've made, you've been short in terms of time frame with the things that you've said, whether strategically and purposely, or just trying to let me get my mouth off, or that didn't sound right, trying to let me trying to get my statements in, whatever the case may be. The gravity of the things that you have said, the stuff that people are going to take away from going to be stuff that you have said. Like, you have dropped little bitty nuggets here and there throughout. Like, your words have always been that. Like, but I've never known you to take a statement or take a question or have a conversation where you were the majority talker in any scenario I have ever known you in. Now, that could have changed because we ain't hung out in 68 years.
That has not changed.
That's always been the Kim I've known, but you have always been powerful. So, yeah, I expected, even when I first asked you to be a guest on, I expected that in terms of the length of talking, I was going to do the heavy lifting, but the power of it, I was going to be. Even the questions that when you try to turn this interview around on me, even the questions that you were asking had impact and power when people go back and listen to it.
Okay. Like I said, I'm an active member of the Say Less Ministry.
I'm just telling you, look, I just give you my perspective on you. You like, I really wish you could understand, because I don't have the intellect or the vocabulary to quite articulate the esteem I have for you and who you are and what you do and the impact that you have. Like, you were up there amongst. So this may make more sense to you than most, maybe, because I don't even know if you remember talking about this person. But if you remember the name Stacey Alexander,
oh yeah,
I hold you in that kind of regard.
Aww.
Like, you because that's the kind of impact. Like, you sis, you understand, you have been that person. There are things that even to this day, my mind be like, okay, Kim said, okay, let me try this. Okay.
No, that is I appreciate, right? Like I appreciate all of the accolades. Like and yeah, I'm gonna leave it there because I'm gonna be strategic with my words, as you say. As I say, I am just an active member of the Say Less ministry.
Well, I will say that you
Blessed
are an active.
quietness,
I will
holy
say you are an
quietness.
active member of the Words with Lightning community. That's what you are. When your words
What
come
was?
out, something happens.
Oh, it was some nickname somebody gave me. I was like, oh, I hate that. It was like Quiet Storm or something. It was a Quiet Storm. I think it was Quiet Storm. Whatever.
That's
But no,
absolutely
I think that
absolutely depicts you.
but I also think that a part of it is also the way that I think and I process, right? Like some people are very extemporaneous, right, with their thought process. And I feel like for me, I am very measured with my thought process and what I want to say and how I want to say it because I want to make sure that I'm conveying the appropriate message and in the right tone and all of the kind of legalities that go along with it, right? Like, so yeah, I don't like, I am not the, like, that's why even when you were talking about like, oh, let's be on this podcast, I'm like, because I feel like I'm not someone who's going to give you like 3 hours worth of conversation around a specific topic without having prepared for it, right? Like I am someone who I need preparation. The anointing is in the preparation, right? Like I need preparation. I need to spend time ordering my thoughts around what it is that I want to say in order to make sure that I don't say the wrong thing. I think that we live in a society now where, I mean, I remember as a kid, it used to be like, pause before you speak, right? Like, because you can't unring a bell. But now we live in a society where it's just like everybody just say whatever they want, like just off the top of their heads. They literally stick mics in your face while you're walking down the street, like, what is your opinion about blah, 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 blah. And it's like no one can say no comment. Nobody can say, like, I am a member of the Say Less ministry. I don't have anything to say about that right now. I haven't formulated an opinion about it right now. I think that we live in a society where we're so focused on kind of those sound bites and that clickbait and all of it that it's just not me. Never has been, never will be. I'm okay with that.
And it doesn't need to be because there is, again, there's so much impact in what you say. And you're absolutely right that I so wish people did a whole lot more either shut up or thought and research behind their statements. Like, give you an example of it, and I'm not necessarily asking for your opinion on it because as you said, you need to be prepared. This just came across my face today, where, well, not just today, yesterday and today, the movie Deliverance on Netflix, which is out, and the Christian community is in a split uproar on my timeline. It is crazy. There are these super deep, super holy, oh my God, it is spiritual warfare, guard this, guard that. And they're saying their thing. And there are people on the other side who are super justification people where I could watch this because it's set in the third. And my first thought was, so how many of you actually even know what the movie's about? Because a lot of y'all are talking about it, and there's no way you've seen it yet. So do you know what the movie's about?
And who it's based on, and the story that it's based on, the real story that it's based on.
Well, that's the thing. So I had a mindset of I'm not going to watch it because I don't like horror films. But that was my whole premise. I'm not a huge horror film person. I do thrillers, but they need to be psychological thrillers more than anything else. I don't all that extra stuff. It's not because I have bad dreams. They're just not my form of entertainment. I just don't get behind them. And so a friend of mine who's also a member of my church was like, do people even know what's going on with it? So they sent me this article that BET did on why Lee Daniels did the movie and the dude's testimony behind it. And I was like, the churchy in me was first like, I was first thrown off with the word exorcism. I'm like, so that's not what we we really do by name. I know that the process or the end result is supposed to be the same, but I'm also big on words. So I don't find exorcism anywhere biblically. So I'm very biased, I should say, with the word exorcism. I'd rather use deliverance, which is what the name of the movie is. So I'm like, okay. And it's a whole testimony. But she said to me, because she was like, I don't know why he kept trying to do it with all the stuff that happened while he was trying to make the movie. Like his dog got sick and almost died the first week of shooting. And in my mind, I was like, so we're going to assign spiritual relevance to his dog getting sick the week he starts making the movie, like dogs don't get sick. But there was just a succession of stuff that kept happening that for me was like, this stuff happens anyway. I don't really look at, I don't really assign spiritual value, quote unquote, to, for lack of a better way to put it, everyday things. So you doing this movie and someone catches a cold is not a sign from God you shouldn't do this movie. The power going out because you watch a certain scene is not God trying to do something. It's not the devil trying to attack your house. Like, slow down. But there's these two sides just battling back, and I was like, this is crazy. None of y'all have watched it. None of y'all know what's going on behind it. And then my friend, Pastor Jay Jordan, he made a post, and I was like, this is the most sensible comment I think I have heard yet, which was simply, so you're against this movie because it may have spiritual impact on your household, demons or whatever, but you don't mind the witchcraft that you're doing every day. You're upset at demons on this TV show, but you ain't upset at the demons in your pulpit. And for me, that provided balance. I was like, that right there. It's not saying watch it or don't. It's saying have a balanced perspective of what you're dealing with. You're upset at one, but okay with the other. And the one thing that you're upset at is of the same ilk that this other thing is. But you're fine with this, but you're not okay with this. And you're also not okay with it because a gay man made the movie. Which, if we pull it down, that's what a lot of people's problem with is. Is that Lee Daniels is a gay dude, and he made this movie based on spirituality. Like, controversial statement for most folk who've never heard me before, because some people may actually tune in because they know you and not have heard my podcast before. Gay folk can be saved. You can be saved and be.
What a radical concept!
Like, my God. I've always wondered why people thought that gay folk can't be saved. Like, and I don't mean like gay folk being saved and delivered from homosexuality. I mean, you be gay and be saved. You can be still struggling with your sin and be saved.
What?
We make so. The one I use all the time, I now kind of almost fit into the category of, because I have a huge gut up under here. You can't really see it right now because I got all of this kind of covering some of it. I used to be here. I'm now here. Just what my stomach now looks like. We talk about homosexuality. You can't be saved and be and engaged in that. But gluttony still is a sin. And a whole lot of y'all 400-pound, 300-pound preachers, you want to talk about the sin of homosexuality, but you are on your fourth plate at dinner. You ain't exercised since Ronald Reagan was the president, and you mad because somebody is dealing with the same sex in their bedroom. They cannot hold hands with their partner. We can't unsee your gut. And if you really want to get deep with it, some of y'all aren't hooping in the pulpit. Some of you are having asthmatic attacks because you can't breathe. And God said, get him an inhaler. It's because you're fat. And you're fat because you're a glutton. But we won't talk about that, though. But you could be a glutton, be a preacher, be saved. But you can't be saved and be
Be like, you can be a glutton, you can be a whoremonger, you could be a whole lot of stuff, right? Like,
You can't be a whoremonger if you're a female. You could be a whoremonger if you're a male, not if you're a female. Because there are churches that have had the drummer who was sleeping with everybody in the choir still drumming, but the chick he knocked up pregnant in the choir said she got to sit down for 9 months while he's still drumming away, or the keyboard is still playing away, or the minister is still preaching away. But the chick who ain't his wife, and I'm only talking about from stuff I have actually seen with my own eyes, she got to sit down. So it's okay to be a whoremonger as a dude, just not a female.
Depends on what church, but yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think that to go back, right? Like, so two things. Number one, to close out the point you were making about, sin is sin. Absolutely. Period. Like, right. Like sin is sin, regardless of, how you want to classify what is acceptable sin and what is not acceptable sin, right? Like sin is sin in God's eye. I think that's number one. But I think number two, to go back to deliverance, it's based on a true story, right? Like, it's not like, oh, somebody just, right? Like, it's not just that, these things happened, while he was shooting this movie, that point to, oh, so much demonic activity. Demons are real. Like, let's not forget that when Jesus really kind of started his public ministry, right? Like, he is teaching in the synagogue, right? And there's a demonic spirit in the church, right? And so, I think that trying to deny it doesn't make it go away. It doesn't make it not exist. It just makes us ill-prepared to address it.
It is the ill-preparedness that really gets to me. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. I am a huge proponent. And oh my God, we've actually been doing this interview for almost 3 hours. So, but I am a huge proponent of blaming leadership for a lot of things. It is our job to equip the saints. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't make you be equipped, but I can put in front of you, in your hearing, and in front of you, the tools necessary to be equipped. It is so rare in a lot of churches. I purposely parsed it and said a lot of churches this time instead of most, or just the church. And that was not even for you. That's just, there's a balance right now in my personal experience of pros to the cons. I have an actual balance. This is one of the few times I've spoken about something in the church that actually has a little balance in all the churches that I have been, have known, have dealt with, see, encounter, whatever. But there are a lot of churches who very rarely mention demonology anymore. Very rarely mention dark spirits and spirits contrary to what God says. We spend a lot of time talking about Jesus, which we should. If I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. Gotcha. Spend a lot of time talking about the Holy Spirit. Gotcha. We need him. Empowerment, teacher, keeper. Gotcha. Spend a lot of time talking, well, not as much time talking about God anymore. It's a lot of time talking about the fruit of the Spirit. Need it. Absolutely. But there's something to be said for understanding spiritual warfare. One of the messages I heard shortly after graduating college, I heard Bishop Mel Griffin teach. It's the first time I've ever heard this message like this. He taught a message that sticks with me today that says, recognize your demons. Mm-hmm. And we are ill-equipped to do that anymore because we don't have people who are versed, and those who are being made to be silent. Mm-hmm. Between them and real prophets, there is a silencing of them. I don't know if it is purposeful, if it is disbelief, or why it is. I just recognize that is what it is. If you talk about anything of that, whether the three things I've noticed the most that are missing in a lot of church teaching, and feel free to tell me your experience or what have you. Real prophets actually doing the work of a prophet, not prophesying houses, cars, and money, but bringing the correction that prophets bring. One of the first things you see the Old Testament prophets do, they come in to put things in order, bring God's word and put it in order. It's a lack of that. There's a lack of conversation concerning spiritual warfare. And there's a lack of conversation concerning end time. Like being prepared spiritually for, and I don't mean in statement, I mean in actual teaching or preaching of, hey, Jesus is coming back. Are you saved? Holiness is still right. Sanctify yourself. Get your house in order type preaching. There's a lot of, I think you used the term earlier, motivational preaching and that ilk that's coming up. But I don't hear as often as I did coming up those kinds of things. And so when someone like Lee Daniels encounters someone who had this kind of a thing, rather than the church, even if they don't want to see it, fine, no problem. But rather than taking the time to say, hey, this thing is real, and using this as a platform to begin to teach about spiritual warfare and how to recognize demons and how to understand how your rank and authority, whether or not you may be the one who has the authority to cast this demon out, or you may mess around and be the sons of Sceva. Like, rather than doing that, we're just saying, oh, it's demonic, don't watch it, yada, yada, yada. And I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't understand the shift either. I will say that, you know, he was asking about the book earlier. That is kind of a small premise, like spiritual warfare really is a small premise underneath the umbrella of economic mobility for folks. And it is based in this idea of what I have seen in my experience as, so I've been doing like economic justice work, right? Like since like whether it's food insecurity, benefits access, economic mobility type of work since you know, college or whatever. But what I've noticed, right, like, and what my experience has been as I work with folks in particular, like when I was doing especially one-on-one counseling, right, like that there are these, I don't care what anybody else wants to call it, demonic spirits, right? Like that attach around our beliefs around how we operate with money. Because it doesn't matter whether or not, you know, folks have access to it, folks have resources or not, like they still create these same patterns, right? Like, and what is it that is the stronghold that is attached to those patterns, right? Like that we need to identify, that we need to cast out, that we need to call out, right? And so I think that across the board, what I have seen in religious witness, right, like is, and especially within specific denominations, like a shying away from that, shying away from having those conversations about spiritual warfare because it's not profitable, right? Like it doesn't make me feel good. It takes away really kind of this sense of personal accountability. And so, yeah, no, I'm not going to teach about that. I'm not going to preach about it, right? Like versus lifting that up as a point and important message, right? Like I think that, yeah, I'm going to say that for that. But I'm also going to say that I think that there are places where the Black church specifically, right, like has lost a lot of its messaging. I would push back on your 3 places and say that there are other places, right, like that we have just gone silent around, that we need to be, you know, teaching and preaching around, that we are not. And it's not historically like where we have taken a stance, you know, within the Black church, right? Like it's not the places that we at one point, you know, didn't talk about. No, these are the things that we used to talk about that we just don't talk about anymore because it's not convenient to your bottom line, right? these are the things that are uncomfortable for us, and we don't want to make people uncomfortable, and therefore we just don't talk about them. And we redact, right, scriptures and put them into this small little like box of Jesus is, my friend, and I am a friend of God, and if you just live this certain way, you'll be blessed. There is do you remember, did you ever see, it was a Honk for Jesus?
Yeah, that's another
Like
Musa
Musa,
movie for me.
Musa. No, wait, what were your thoughts about that?
So, because I know some of the history behind it, not just not just what they were mirroring their plot line from, because they pulled back from saying it was focused about this particular preacher's life and downfall, even though it absolutely was. And part of it was also the two people who did the movie had beef with that preacher because they used to be members of his church. All of that aside, the movie itself pissed me off on two fronts. One, because that boat happens in the church. And the fact that it has become so common that now the world is making fun of it. And we're just like, oh, well, it happens.
I was going to say, is it the world or is that us?
It's both. But there are, even though it shouldn't be something we make fun of in-house, I've always lived by, right, wrong, or indifferent, I've always lived by, there's certain things that we can say in-house that should not be said outside. Because while we're saying it in-house, we also should be correcting it. When it's said out-house, you don't have the authority, power, insight, or whatever to correct it. So you're just saying it to make fun or to tear down or whatever. I take issue with that because I'm on the inside, right? So it angers me. It's become so commonplace that that's the thing. Same time, it also what really kept hitting me was they're bitter about it because so many things were so overly exaggerated, which is not true to context, nor is it true to how, like, I really, the fact that the wife was so power hungry that she was willing to, we're going to sweep all of this under, just for the power.
Do you think that doesn't happen?
It's not that it doesn't happen, but these things just angered me. Like, it just kept rising in me. But I knew that the movie was not created from a place of, let's expose this to, if nothing else, shame the black church into doing some things about to get it right. It was, and there were interviews I've read from them doing this as well, so I'm not just pulling this from my own, like, oh, this is what I think about them. These are some things in different interviews that has been said by them. It was done to expose and tear down the church itself because they no longer believed in the institution of church. And so there was so much from that angered me. Like, I could go on a diatribe about point by points the things that really angered me about this movie. But overall, what angered me about it was that Christians watched it and were, that was a good movie. What you mean it was a good movie? It's a horrible movie. And I don't mean horrible in terms of acting or plot. It was a horrible movie because, nigga, this is the church. You don't see that we need to get this right. You just look at it as, oh, this is a piece of entertainment, a piece of cinema, a piece of, what the?
Now do a compare and contrast, right? Like between that movie and Deliverance.
Well, because I haven't seen Deliverance, it's kind of hard because I don't know the plot details of, or I should say I don't know the content of. I know the plot of it, and I know where it comes from. So if I look at it from that perspective, my compare is, I don't really see a whole lot of comparison too, because I don't think, and again, more of that would be understood, I think, by me if I actually saw the movie. I don't think that there was, within the context of the movie, I'm exposing this to tear down the church. I don't think this was a let's make fun of church and church ritual or what have you. I legitimately think, without having seen it, this was I really find this incident that from this person that I heard about, I find it fascinating. And I, who kind of grew up in church, know a little bit about it. Let me make this movie because this is real and this is fascinating. I am awestruck by it. Like I really feel like that was his mindset behind it. But the church running from the fact of it is the only similarity I see between the two. But the contrast is why they're running from it. One is because they don't believe that this thing is still a thing. That being demonology and demons exist and people being possessed and that type of stuff. The other is, hey, we don't want you looking at us. So let's cover that back up. Because the black church was notorious for making fun of the Catholic Church with all of this stuff. When meanwhile, this stuff and more was running rampant in our church at the same time.
Where do you put like Christian comedians, right? Like, and especially I feel like there was just like a huge boom during the pandemic of folks, right? Like who are on YouTube, who are doing the reels, who are doing the TikToks, right? Like, and just doing these comedic bits around the church.
I'm multifaceted on it. I try to get a feel for where their heart is in it. Kev on Stage is a good one. I'm huge fan of Kev on Stage. Have been a fan of his forever. He's been doing comedic bits about the church forever, and is a comic. He doesn't even consider himself a Christian comic. He's just a comic who works clean. Most of the comedy that he deals with in his bits, in the things that he is talking about, oftentimes come from his actual personal experience. He just found a way to put a funny spin on it to make people enjoy it or laugh about it. A lot of the videos that he used to show were stuff that people would send to him and say, hey, come look at this thing. What is your perspective on it? And as a comic, his nature is, let me find the funny in it. So I look to try to understand, or at least get a feel for, whether spiritually or doing an investigation on the comic, their purpose behind it. I think that the church has become overall an easy comedic target because of the dumb stuff that we do, that we don't explain why we do it. And so outside looking in, and even if you're in it and it's not explained, it's just funny, and it can be funny. I've gotten more and more upset about it not because the Christian comics are doing it, but the backlash of them doing it. Because the backlash becomes not, oh, this isn't something that's normal that happens in the church. This is an isolated incident, or this happens, to some churches, not to most. Or the statements aren't, hey, yeah, this person's wrong for whatever the thing is that's being made fun of, or the skit that they're being doing. It is more so that I have seen the backlash is, hey, you shouldn't talk about that outside the house. It's the church. You don't make fun of the church. That's the man of God. You don't make fun of the man of God. And we are so protective of the ideology of church, as opposed to being protective. I think we are. I think we're protective of the ideology of church. We want the church to be seen as sacred from the outside, or to the outside. So you don't get to talk about the man of God. You don't get to question the man of God. You don't get to question church from the outside. even if it makes sense to question it. You don't get to make fun of it, even if it's funny. The comments I see that these comments hit, those are those kind of comments. It's never, hey, that was wrong. Not the comedy, but what they did. Or, hey, this doesn't happen in our church. Maybe you should try a different church. Or anything that tries to shed light on this thing isn't cool. We don't like it. It needs to be corrected. But please don't think this is all churches. There's not a lot of that. It's more covering, hey, no, the church does. Like when, giving my own personal example, this wasn't real, but I did this on an episode of the Real Talk podcast with the Pastors Crew. We dealt with William Murphy and New Year's Eve and him swag surfing. And the amount of comments about, oh, you can't question the man of God and this, that, and the third. He did an altar call without actually looking at the context, nor what we were saying what some other people had protest about, which was, first of all, you did all of that during the message. You went from, and Jesus walks, to back that up, like right away. There was no transition. There was no stop. And what he actually did was he had his message. He started his close, and in the midst of his close, his DJ played "Walk It Out," which was a part of his close. They walked it out. They swag surfed. He went from that to an altar call. He went from starting an actual altar call to then telling everybody, join my community, join the church, and then said that was an altar call. And because 150 people came to join the church, he parlayed that into 150 people got saved. When there was no prayer given for salvation, there was no talk concerning repentance of sin. There was no talk about Jesus being Lord and recognizing, believing that Jesus is the Son of God. None of that. And so this is what we talked about in the podcast. How that's first of all, that shouldn't be done. You can have a party. My take on it was you can have a party. If you have a New Year's Eve party, have a New Year's party. I don't care about you having a New Year's Eve party. It's the placement that you had it. If you're going to have service, do the service, then the party. Or just do the party, or just do the service. Don't try to integrate the two, especially when you're integrating the two with secular music and you didn't even have the intelligence to get the clean version of the song. So all of the words that you say you don't like being said in church are being said in the music in church. And then you got everybody swag surfing to the music in the church.
This sounds like Bill Cosby right now. In the church.
So we there was a lot of backlash that came from that because, oh my God, you can't question me, God, this, that, and the third. But no, but this is wrong. So I think we're very protective of the idea of church, of the ideology of church, what church, especially as black folks, what church is supposed to represent. But we're no longer as protective of making sure it holds true to the statutes, the standards that the Word of God
This
says.
is Real Talk. Real Talk Radio. This is Real Talk. High Praise Ministries presents Real Talk. Real Talk. This is Real Talk. Real Talk Radio. This is Real Talk. High Praise Ministries presents Real Talk. Real Talk. Real Talk.